do a great job for someone, you will end up getting paid well. You might not get paid well in the interim because everyone's got a business to run, they've got to scale it. But when you become highly valuable to a business, that business has an ultimatum when they depend on you.
So Andy, as we said before coming on air, like I've seen a lot of your work, you've seen a lot of my work, and we haven't actually connected in so long. Especially because of the fact that our mutual friend, the reason why I know you, is now a weekly guest on the show. So I thought this would be an interesting topic of two relatively elder statesmen now. It's weird. I always think of myself as the young guy in the industry, and then I go into work and I realise I'm the oldest guy there, including my manager at the gym I work at. I'm like, my God, I am now the person I moaned about, like Nick Daniel saying, like, when in my day, the old folk singer. Now that's me. I love you, Nick. But before we go into how to help coaches become, less overworked, less underpaid, tell us a little bit, for anyone that doesn't know who you are, tell us a little bit about your story and your coaching journey.
Yeah, it's such a long-winded one. How long have we got?
Mate, go for it. I love a good tangent.
I think, look, first and foremost, I entered sport, training, coaching as an athlete. I didn't quite get to where I wanted to get to in football. And I remember being with Steve, who's our mutual friend we've spoken about, and we went, what the fuck do we do with our lives? I don't want to work in retail like all my friends at that age. I need to do something. So I got involved in like PE teaching. And, it was a thing called, you would go in and basically take classes. You weren't actually a PE teacher. You kind of go in and contract for them. And we did it for ages. And me and Steve used to go, fuck, I hate children. They don't listen. I want to train adults and actually like learn about something and get some tangible results with people. So Steve was actually like, I'm going to do my level 3. So I let him do that. And I kind of copied him a little bit later and went and done mine. And we got our first job at Virgin Active in Angel Islington. And absolutely loved that place, met some really good friends, cut our teeth as coaches, and then quickly realised that the people that we were coaching were worse than the children that we were coaching to begin with.
I was just about to ask you. Like, you said to me, like, I hate it. Children don't do what they're told. I'm like, neither do any of my adults. They're bigger children. And it's more frustrating because they know better.
So what I was going to say is, how naive were we? And it brings me on to a point that I'm going to speak about later, is when coaches enter the industry, we are really naive to begin with because we don't know what we're working with. So one of the best upbringings was actually working in a massive commercial gym where we met a vast amount of people, but also we saw a load of other coaches doing what they need to do, good, bad, ugly. Done that for a bit. And then myself, Steve, and our good friend Jack, we broke off, went to a private studio, which I think you visited before in Blackfriars. And we started working together because we were all shit scared of lead gen. We didn't know nothing. We were like, we'll work together and it will kind of do something. And we worked together for ages. And then we kind of all just broke up and done our own things, but still continued as friends and worked there. And we kind of had a thing with the Charles Poliquin stuff. We went down that route. All our mutual friends were doing it and basically got into the realms of, I want to be an S&C coach and I want to work with athletes. So all my information, everything I was learning about was athletic development. And I was trying to train Jim, Dot, and Bob at the gym with this kind of philosophy because I believe it's a good way to train. And I was an athlete to begin with. So I was kind of learning all these things and realizing that it's a good things to do with your clients, but you're not necessarily going to get the best out of them because they're not engaged in it. And what I started learning is communication skills, how to be a people's person, how to bend some of the things that you learn that are like top tier literature and turn it into baby dumbed down versions where they can get the best out of it. So that's kind of where that kind of went from. And then I ended up moving to Guildford because Nat's from me. I've been with Nat nearly 13 years now. We're getting married in June. We work together now. And we have a business called More Than Muscle. And we started obviously in Fleet Street, but now we've settled down and we're in Surrey, where we have a team of 2 other coaches. So there's 4 of us. And we've got things going on in the background. It's a personal training business. And what we try to do is transform, rehabilitate, and bridge the gap between your nutrition coach, your physio coach, whilst giving you a transformation. That's what we do with our demographic. But it's kind of got this like S&C twang to it because that's what I love. And that's kind of where we're at with it. And now I've got a ball patch.
The stress of working with the adult kids is caused the hair loss. But with the You mentioned at the start, like how naive you were working with these, the adults were as hard as the children. And then you started wanting to transition to athletes, which is a natural transition, I suppose, for wanting to find more compliant clients. And you sort of come back around to work with people who are busy, stressed, wanting to move better. What made you come full circle?
I'm glad you asked that question because I kind of missed it out. But I love training kids now. Youth kids, I think it's the blank canvas and you can build them up. And if you have them long enough and you're fortunate too, you've kind of created the athlete to have good habits, good training practices, the science, everything is brought into you because you've had them from baby. And that goes full circle back to how I was at the beginning when the truth was I was still a kid. That's why I couldn't relate with them. I couldn't enforce a power on top of them. I couldn't build good habits because I was still a baby. And I think the nugget that I'm trying to get is one of the reasons why I feel like we're decent coaches is because we got hours behind our belt, going through a lot of different demographics, peoples, races, religions, the whole lot. And I feel like now if you said to me, hey, here's an elite athlete, I've got the tools. But at the same time, if you stuck me in front of Ted, who's 97, and he's got two no knees, he's got no knees, brother, he's half blind, he can't hear, I still give him a good session. And that's because of those little experiences that you get around. And that's a message I always give to coaches that come and do like little mentorships with me is you've got to get about the horses before you start refining, I think.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more with that. I want to zero back in with coming back and the kid thing and how you can build the habits on a blank canvas. And I think that's something that's so underappreciated. And I think it's something that people only appreciate when it's a little bit too late. I know from my youth, I played a lot of rugby and got battered around a bit. But when, like yourself, when my rugby, I'm not going to say rugby career because it was not a career. When my rugby playing days ended, I went so far into bodybuilding. It's been my passion and I've loved it. But I see kids now that got involved in so many sports and moved in different ways. And you just see them now, me at 30 years old with probably a number of bone spurs. That means I'll never get to the levels of mobility that I had capable of. If you ingrain those practices in me at 13, 14, 15 years old, I'll be a totally different athlete today. And I'd have so many more options on the table. I'll be more pain-free. I'll probably be stronger. I think it's a power that I don't think many people tap into from a coaching perspective, really, because no one wants to do it.
Yeah. I think that a big issue I had when I was a kid, I still think that I had the tools to make it, or I didn't. And I still think that's a belief within me. And I think any athlete who's tried will always have that belief in them, even if they recognize you might not be a Premier League, Champions League, World Cup player. I still think I could have done something more than what I did. But I feel like what I was doing was channeling my energy wrong. I was trying really hard, doing the wrong things. And part of the problem was S&C wasn't really a thing. The literature wasn't deep back then. It was your coach was your fitness coach. They would just batter you basically, and you would work hard because you were trying to do the right thing. And what I was actually doing was training so hard that when it got to match day, I was fucked. And the kids that were maybe genetically more developed, like they're fast, quick, powerful, just naturally could expose it. But also the kids that didn't care so much could express it because they were never tired. Plus, I didn't have the stuff that I know now about psychology, mentality, all of those things. I was putting such a pressure on myself. And maybe that's the reason why I would go hiding in the game or I wasn't playing so well. But again, we spoke about this in the podcast that we do with our More Than Muscle stuff, because Max is a basketball player and whatever. And we were speaking together. And those little things that we went through are now what makes me a very good coach, quote unquote, very good. Yeah, I don't like to blow my own trumpet with that. But without that, I don't think I would have half the tools that I have now because of that journey. So I don't live in regret going, I had shit coaches and those coaches were malicious, because they wasn't. But that's what's built where I am today. It gives me a perspective. And I think if you're coming into coaching and you don't have that background, then there's a lot of legwork you need to do. It's not just the book.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think it's something that's becoming more prevalent with people now going straight off the PT course into the online coaching because they've not got those reps under the belt. They want the in Bali, and they've read Micah Sotell's book, or they've read How to Change Diets, Mandy Morgan, and you think, right, I've got this.
Yeah,
I'm good to go. And there's an understanding, especially if you're dealing with fat loss, when someone is making an excuse on when you need to empathize. You know when you're pushing them too hard. You know the repercussions. You know when the signs of someone overtraining, and you know when to, or even how to deload. They are the art of coaching, I think, rather than the science of coaching.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
You know what? That's where my passion lies, is coaching over everything else. Because the book, you can read it, you just spend time and you'll learn it, right? But I always say to the coaches that I hire, you need to go and get coached. And they sometimes reply, I am getting coaching. I've got my online coach. And I'm like, no, you need to go and get coaching. I'm not disrespecting that coach. He's obviously very good, or she's obviously very good. But what I mean is, it's the hands-on, dirty communication stuff that happens in a session. So, for example, weightlifting is a sport that I enjoy. I'm not very good at it. I'm okay. But when you get coached by a weightlifting coach, you learn the type of cues over all the biomechanics and the technical stuff. Those cues are really, really important. So there was an instance once when we were training, right? And Nat was prepping for a comp. And she was doing a 1 RM block pull clean, right? She was doing a clean from the blocks for 1 RM. And the coach had an intern with her. And the coach went to Nat, be careful, but go for it. And Nat missed it. And the coach was livid after, but she didn't show that because it's an intern. She spoke to the person later and said, look, you shouldn't do this. What would probably have benefited more is Nat getting an external cue, like push the floor away hard, or just fucking leg press the floor, just like an emphasis thing. And she would have made it because she had the tools to do it. But the type of cue the intern gave, even though it was like a safety first thing, be careful, go for it, put a seed of negative doubt in her, right? But the lesson we get from that is, you can't really get that from online coaching. You need to get around the houses, have people tell you things, see how people communicate things. And for me, that's what develops your coaching skills. I'm not saying you don't do online coaching because, hey, we both offer that service. Mm-hmm. But as a coach, like from coach to consumer, it doesn't matter. If the consumer is just general pop and they just want training programs, then cool. But from coach to coach, I think the coach needs hands-on coaching as well. You need to feel what the barbell feels like. You need to understand how your coach has spotted you, what type of cues they give you, when to slap someone on the bum and go, let's go. You see what I mean? So I feel like there's a lot of that getting lacking because the online thing is just, it's just growing so rapidly and it's accessible.
Do you think an internship in terms of working for somebody is enough, or do you feel like someone needs to physically get coached? Because I've worked essentially at some of the world's biggest PT gyms. You obviously know of many of them. And I've been interned essentially in the way of coaching, which has tenfold improved my skills over the years. But nothing, I don't think, has taught me like having somebody of more experience than me, or even same or lesser experience than me, just train me or train with me. And the difference, I did an arm session with Anthony from Shapeshifters, and I've also done an arm session with Tom Kernington from Body Development in Bath. And you know Tom, right? And that bicep session was more of a cardio workout than my cardio sessions. And that in itself made me realize how hard not only I can train, but how much further I could push my clients safely.
Yeah. One, you got to feel it. Two, you need to feel the way people communicate the same sessions or the different facets of the same sessions. But the first thing, I'll go back to this always. People always say to me, what did you learn at uni, Andy? And a lot of the time I say, not much. A lot of it I knew already. But one thing it did do is it taught me how to have a critical mind, which gave me good learning skills to learn literature and go, this is bullshit or this ain't bullshit, or even just communicating, presenting. And those skills for me have been tenfold. I think it's one of the best experiences I had was going. But I'll always remember the first thing that Dan did with us, our lecturer. He said, write down your philosophy. And it was blank. And I was thinking, fuck, man, I've coached nearly 10 years and I can't write it down. And guess what? The whole room was blank. And I always use this exercise now with all the coaches that I mentor, because if you can start putting down what your philosophy looks like, mixing my words, what your philosophy looks like, you start creating the way you're going to coach, the way your identity is, how you're going to cue, like what people expect of you. And you'll also start radiating the type of person you want to work with, because Instead of you going through Jim, Dot, Alvin, all the other people, you're going to go with the people you want to work with. You're going to start to get results. You're going to become more scalable. You're going to have more referrals. All of these things are going to happen because it's like a magnet, right? You're not like polarized away. You're attracting what you need and you're starting to be effective, which then makes you really confident because you're getting results. And the whole thing kind of grows together. And I just think philosophy is only developed when you start looking into it. And you'll only look into it when you're getting around coaches, when you're having coaching, when you're actually thinking about it. Because I had coaches, Derek Woodskid coached me, Luke Lehman had done a bit. There was loads of different things that I got through, but I never actually even looked into it. So I couldn't even map it on paper. So how could I stand up in front of everyone and go, hey, I'm going to mentor you on certain facets of fitness, business, whatever it is, when I haven't even looked into it myself? And I think once you start doing that, doors open.
I also think I'm really glad you mentioned that thing about philosophy, because as I said to you before we came off air, I'm very close to launching my mentorship program. And the second lecture in that is building your system. So showing you what my system is, giving you a framework, and then teaching you how to personalize it to your own. And that, for me, came about very similar to yourself in this thing that I went for years of kind of having a system given to me when you were at UP, but like never really having my own philosophy, as you said it yourself. So I would go into a course and I couldn't apply any of it because I didn't have a framework of which to go, that's good, that works here, that's rubbish, take that out, or that's good, but it doesn't work with what I do, but it's a tool in my toolbox. If I didn't have the skeleton, I don't know where to put the muscles. So for me, when I started having that system in place, it not only allowed me to get better marketing, better client results, better client communication, because I could show the journey, but it actually helped me get better because I took away so much overwhelm of me trying to learn everything in personal training. It's the biggest jack of all trades job in the history of the world, of psychology, nutrition, training, like communication, all these things, and just zeroed it down into, right, let's refine this. I think that's super important.
It's so important, but I've learned a lesson the hard way, because everyone drills into you with businesses. You need systems, operations, processes. You need to have automations. You need to have better communication streams. You need to have the skeleton, the framework. Your product needs to be productized so that people know what they're getting from A to B, the journey, all of these things, right? And then I started hiring people. And I'm like, you need to do this. You need to do this. This is the process. That's the process. And it still didn't quite work. It was working, but it still wasn't quite working because I have my way of doing things. My clients and people around my business understand the way we do things. And that brings me on to the next point. If you're going to scale and grow and bring people into the business, culture is really important, because you shouldn't have to dictate to someone and go, this is the way you do it. But if your culture dictates that, then you are starting a really powerful mechanism of making the SOPs work for you, because the people are doing the things that you want them to be doing, because there's an understanding of, you've worked in the biggest business in fitness, arguably, who has the most identifiable culture in UP. How strong was that in terms of, if you stepped outside of that culture, there's a frown. So the boss would never need to really say to you, because the culture would make you do that anyway. And what tends to happen is people leave because they don't like the culture, but the people that stay generally do a good job, because it's the same thing as, like, my philosophy is here, radiates the people I want to work with. Everyone else, there's plenty of other people you can go and find.
How did you begin?
So culture is something.
How did you begin to create? You had staff.
Yeah, so I'm still learning, right? But I read a really good book called The Minute Manager. One of my mentors told me to do. I recommend reading it if you haven't. But basically, it was talking about the old school mechanism of managing was micromanaging every single process. Do this is my process, do this is the system. You have to do this at this time. The problem with micromanagement is you dampen fulfillment. If you dampen fulfillment, you don't get everyone pulling in the right place. So I've learned this new skeleton of how you're supposed to do things. And the Minute Manager is basically giving people the tools rather than the systems. And they will then take the interpretation of those tools and work in the same way you would work, or slightly in their own persona. but it's still pulling in the right direction. And if they have a problem, they will come back to you as the expert, and it'll only take you a minute of work because you fulfilled them. You'll point them in the right direction. They'll go back and do the job. And it's a big lesson I've learned because I'm very much like, this is my way. This is how we do it. But it doesn't work. People end up just going and doing a shit job version of it. And the biggest difficulty, and whether you get along with Nick Mitchell or not, he will tell you the hardest thing when you scale a business like my business and his business, we're nowhere near what they're doing. But the biggest problem is it's not like McDonald's where you say, here's the burger, you put it in for 2 minutes, you take it out after 2 minutes, then you put it in the bun, you put the nice bit of cheese on, blah, 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 blah. And then any person can come in, follow that process and go. When we're working with people, right, there's going to be my process onto them and their process onto the next gen of people, which are the clients. And there's also going to be a vast array of personalities that they work with. So no one system is going to be enough. So what actually happens better for us is we build tools, tools and mechanisms that sit around the processes. And I feel like what then happens is you create KPIs. If people meet the KPIs, you're starting to build a culture because no one wants to be that person that doesn't meet the KPI. And then your role is there as the minute manager to guide and facilitate rather than dictate. You don't want to be a dictator. You want to be a facilitator.
You create a framework rather than a system, I suppose. And then when they come to you, they come to you because they want to get better at this rather than they're coming from you as they've done a bad job or they wanted to show off a good job. It's like, how do I do more of this? And I bet that makes your conversation manager often, unless someone's massively underperforming their KPIs, much easier to manage, I would assume. Yeah,
and it's almost like it's taken me a long while, so it's been difficult, right? I'm not going to say this has been easy, but it's been difficult. But now I can see the light and it's getting easier and we're buying into things and people are doing what they need to be doing. And then I look back and go, my football career, how people used to manage me, my coaches, it's very similar. I just didn't understand it then. You know, you think it's all right, it's 4-4-2, do this, overlap when this doesn't actually happen like that. The good coaches will say, have an open body, make sure you check your shoulder. Then it's up to you to scan, process, see the situation and play the right pass. You give them the tools, they go and action the tools. And this business that we have, that a lot of personal trainers will be having, I feel is very resonating with that. And that's what I'm talking about when I go back in time and go, I didn't quite make it to footballer, but some of those things, I didn't pick up those lessons because I wasn't aware and I didn't have to apply them. But it puts me in the position I'm in now because I can now look into that and apply it in a different light.
One of the things that I always resonate with me is I watched a lot of documentaries when England won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. And one of the big things Clive Woodward did, he's like, if I give them everything they need to succeed, if I give them every luxury in the book, I pay for the hotels, I get the physios, I get the psychologists, I give them the best training facilities, I get the best, like everything is catered for, then the only thing they need to do is go out and perform. And they've created an environment which sort of fosters success because people want to work for him as opposed to being told what to do by him. And it's just a totally different mentality. You have that confidence in yourself to act at your best rather than feel like you're treading on eggshells all the time.
Yeah, I mean, remember Charles used to say, you are the 5 people you hang around with most. You have to facilitate the culture through the environment you create. And so if you're not part of this environment, see you later, bye-bye. We bring people in. It's slowly, you know, one of the things is, you know, when a new manager comes into a football club or a rugby club, let's say, he's got 2 options, in my opinion, or she. They got 2 options. They either get rid of the lot and bring their own people in and it goes, or you have to make small changes slowly to kind of facilitate and culture that growth of the environment. And I feel like if you're taking over someone else's shit, you need to do that and you need to make a concise decision on how you're doing it. But if you're building it from scratch, it's just having those fundamentals in you so you can grow and facilitate that.
Yeah. How does that work down when you've got that overall sort of culture that you created in your job? When it comes down to the smaller, nuanced, more specialist tasks that coaches have to deal with, and the things that people either are really good at or struggle, there's intangible stuff, right? And what the example I'll give is touch points. So if you're working with general population clients, especially when it comes to fat loss, and there's a lot of emotional connections to fat loss and why we eat, more regular touch points on the whole is a better thing. Now, I know some people are masters of this. They just have it naturally, just have this knack for it. Organization skills are amazing. They're just on top of this. And then you got other people, and I'll hold my hand up and say I'm one of these people, that it's not that we don't care, but we're just not minded in that way. I suppose, whether, I don't know which side of the coin you are on this yourself, but you have a standard that you want to uphold with every single client that comes in the door. So when someone isn't natural at some of these things that maybe come so effortless to you, how do you begin coaching those people? Because maybe you never had to learn this in the same way.
Yeah. It's a very, very difficult task sometimes, trying to convert kind of someone who's really good at working at 50% all the time. They do a really good job, or they're like 50, 60%, and they always do a good job, but there's no like highs and there's no lows, but they're actually really effective for you because it's always the same standard, versus people that are like this all the time, sometimes really good, sometimes shit. And you're trying to create this like nice performance marker. But I think it takes time to make them understand where they're weak. That's the first thing. You need clarity on what's going to help benefit you. And I think once you create that clarity for someone, you have to work very, very hard at trying to understand the things that you need to be doing from a task perspective, from a systems perspective, and from like, what is the product here? So if it's fat loss, let's say, and you've got a 12-week product, what are the things that you should be doing at each stage of those things as a coach, trying to embed that on whoever the person is. And a lot of it is, what we're trying to implement a bit better now is understanding what kind of personality type is the person that's come in. Because everyone wants the same goal, but someone could be like that really intelligent person that also has a lot of fear because they're looking at every single detail that is like in front of them, but they're also logging everything, tracking everything. It makes my life really easy as an online coach because I can just look at the data and make manipulations, versus the person who's really creative or like hugely stressed, or like it's not quite priority number one, it's priority number three. So how do we get the same goal across using different tools? And I think what we're trying to do now is create those different frameworks, but then have these like frameworks that are like this, that kind of cross over, because no one's ever one or the other. But it's a difficult answer, because that's the problem with scaling this kind of business, is it's not like 2 minutes bun in, take it out, next one, blah, blah, blah. It's more, make sure you have an idea of what's in front of you. This is the tools. Make your decision. This is the KPI that we need to meet at the end of, let's say, a quarter of the year. What's happened well, what's not happened well, and then we'll look at the weakness and we'll just work on it a little bit more.
It's a really unique industry in that sense, right? Because you as a manager, you're gonna have to deal with coaches with various different personalities, various different strengths and weaknesses, biases, histories, own training histories, own emotional connections, who are then dealing with people who have their own stress, biases, emotional connections, priorities. So you're almost trying to impact that person third down the chain via somebody.
Yeah.
So you've got to get a result by helping them communicate that to somebody else, which is like it does. I think you alluded to this already. Does creating culture in your clients, like you do in your staff, make this easier because you can provide education for them? You can provide some level of automation in terms of their journey to keep them engaged. Is that something you have in More Than Muscle?
Yeah. Again, I went through a real transitional phase when we started, because we're stepping into unknown territory. I'm scaling my business. We're getting leads in, we're doing well. We've leveraged the name of who we are, and now we're opening up to more individuals who have done a great job for us. But I'm not aware on how I'm supposed to like scale properly because it's new. And some of the pitfalls that we've had in the past is me trying to be the rescuer all the time rather than leading by example. And by leading by example, I'm giving them that framework to get better. And what I mean by that is I'll be on the gym floor seeing a few things that might not be quite how I would have done them. And then it's like, you should be doing it like this. You should be doing it like this. Because I'm trying to rescue them the whole time. Not because they're doing anything wrong. They shouldn't be at that elite level yet. They're not there. They're new. They're cutting their teeth. But I'm trying to rescue the situation. Whereas what I'm trying to do now is lead from the front, show them. And then they will come to you. It's like that minute manager kind of thing. They'll come to you and go, hey, how did you actually achieve that lovely split squat? Because I've got this client who keeps falling back on their heel. Or, when we keep saying that a remedial exercise is a split squat, but hey, they just can't get into a split squat because they're that weak or they're too overweight to do it, for example. So you can either dictate and tell them all the time as a rescuer, but that's not very fulfilling. If you're always being told this is wrong, that's wrong, this is wrong, what you're actually doing is just squashing someone's ability to want to grow because it's in a negative kind of environment all the time. And these are things that I'm learning because I never had the bad intention to do that. All I wanted was to produce a quality service. But these are people skills and they're coaching skills. And it's also understanding the difference between different individuals because our coaches are different personalities as well. Same as our clients. You know, you've got the people that are really diligent. They want to be told this is shit. And it's like, let's go. Come on. That environment brings me up. But also if you have certain people that you talk like that and it'll just squash them completely down. So those are kind of the things that I've been doing with our internal work. In terms of the external work, a lot of the stuff that comes through the door is I'm working for a corporate company, whether it's a Virgin Fitness First or, you know, an actual private one like a UP. I'm working my nuts off. I'm getting paid not much. I'm delivering an excellent service. How can I do this on my own? Online seems good because I can see the scale of it. What kind of things change? And I think the number one thing I always say to the guys is, what do you want from this? What do you really want? It's not about the entry, it's about the exit. Most people go, oh, there's an opportunity here, let's go. Then 2 weeks in, they're like, this is not the right thing. Do you understand where you're going to go with it? And you might find it along the way, but do you kind of understand what is the task here? What I'm trying to get to? Where do I want to go? Then your entry is slightly different because you understand that. And then the second thing I always say to them, let's create some clarity here. Once you're clear on what you need to do, we can start building steps and frameworks to get you there. And then finally, the last thing I say to them is, do you want to own a business or do you want to own your job? And that's a big, big question I ask them because there's so many people going around going, I'm a business owner. But what they actually are doing are the marketing, the lead gen, the sales process, the tax, the accounting, the training programs, the client communications, the check-ins, the onboarding, the offboarding. They're doing all of that. So now they've gone from working from a nice corporate gym where they were getting paid a decent amount, all they need to do with the training programs, to actually just owning the job role now, rather than having a business which they can build, scale, maybe sell off when they're done and have an exit. And that's a question I always ask at the beginning because you know what it's like. Everyone on Instagram's a business owner, an entrepreneur, but really they just own their own job. They're doing everything now. So now they're £50 instead of their £30. Their £50 is liquidated. It's worth less than the £30 they were getting. And so many people don't realize this. So that's kind of how I start with the external people.
I also think as well, I think it's an important question because not everybody wants to be a business owner. And I think some people like working for the private high-end personal training facilities. Some people like working for the freelance sort of model where you just come in, pay a rent, and you're technically a business owner, but you're not really. You're doing your session and paying a rent. But I feel in the fitness industry, because it's a newer industry overall, there's not really much option. A lot of these companies pay people so poorly and creatively stifle so many people that you end up in this situation where people don't want to be in this environment anymore. But they don't necessarily want to be self-employed. But this is the only other option. If there was an option where people could actually make really good money, work for somebody, get a bit of creative freedom, what you think, write about training, speak about training, do their passion projects, they might actually prefer to just stay employed and not have any of all that extra stuff. And then there'll always be the entrepreneurial that will want to do that and want to take the leap. But I reckon so many people, I bet now if you ask people who have been in the business world for a while, I bet there's a massive proportion of people who got into running a business because they feel it was the only option to make money in this industry, as opposed to actually wanting to be a business owner. Because lawyers, you might don't get this as often. You don't get people starting their own law firms that often because they make enough money being employed to know they don't want to do it.
Yeah. It's absolutely right. They're underpaid, overworked. Then they want to go and create their own business, but they're actually just owning their own job because they're thinking they're going to earn more, have a better lifestyle. And there is opportunity to do it, but there's still work to be done that way. And for a long time, you're going to be underpaid and overworked doing that. So it's about having that vision. That's why clarity is important. And what do you want to do as your exit? Where do you want to go with this? But you're absolutely right. You and me and Steve and all the rest of these guys that we've spoken to in the past, there are so many people. If we came as a collective and we said, do you know many of your colleagues who are self-employed, who are fantastic coaches that would be happier if they just bit the bullet and stayed employed. They're very good coaches, and they're in a stress now because they can't create lead gen. They're not very good with all the other shit that comes along with business. And they would actually just do a very fucking good job for someone if they just bit that bullet and forgot what social media tells us, FOMO, all the rest of it. I know quite a few. I can close my eyes and listen. I won't do that. But it's like, there's nothing wrong with it. Do a great job for someone. You will end up getting paid well. You might not get paid well in the interim because everyone's got a business to run. They've got to scale it. But when you become highly valuable to a business, that business has an ultimatum when they depend on you. So they can either pay you or you then walk on and you've created a good identity CV for yourself. Someone else would probably hire you. But you're absolutely right in so much as it's an industry that doesn't pay well because it's a relatively new industry, and we're not selling things that are seen as necessity. It's kind of a luxury product. Even though we know health is really necessary, there's so many ways in which you can get healthy. So it's difficult, I think.
On that note, we said there's a collective, and you mentioned me, Steve, and all the people we sort of know. Taking aside the fact that you know you've done all right, you succeed enough for people to ask you help from business. If you, knowing the hard work it took, and that's all you knew, rather than the light at the end of the tunnel, would you do it again?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know whether it would be fitness. But the entrepreneurial side of myself would do it in some light.
Why
so? Whether it was physio, I just enjoy it. So we go back to personality traits, right? My personality trait is always curiosity, wanting to know more, thrive on anxiety, thrive on stress. I thrive on those things. Now, there's a lot of negatives that come with that as well. But as I grow as a business owner and a human, I've learned how to channel those things better, which is helping. But I think sometimes when you don't have those traits, you don't also have the curiosity to want to have that entrepreneurial side of things. So I think I wouldn't say destined, but I was destined to kind of do that. Whether it was PT or fitness or some realm of something, I think I would have found myself that way.
Going back to the rescuer trait. So this goes back to like short-term versus long-term looking at your business. Your short-term, when you were an employed PT or when you were starting the business where you owned your own job, as you put it, your focus was making sure the client had a good service, right? That's the short and the long term for you. I suppose now when you're working with staff and you want to go in and rescue them, that's you coming in from that short-term mindset. I want to save that client and make sure they have a good experience. Where the long-term play is, even if it ends up that client doesn't get the best experience, if I help that coach and make them feel fulfilled, the next 5 clients will in turn make me more money and better fulfillment. Was that a difficult thing to overcome at first when you couldn't micromanage the end goal of clients? And if that's the case, how did you overcome that?
It still is difficult. But I now understand the significant value of what I'm trying to achieve the other way around. And we're seeing way more benefit. And it was never a case that my coaches gave clients a shit service. They never did, or they never did that. My coaches do really well. And they never did not turning up on time. And they always do those things bang on. It's just, how long in the teeth we are as coaches. There's little elements where you're like, if I was coaching, I could have just put his toe that way and it would have been so much better. But ultimately, that's part of scale. And I have to overcome that and fulfill my coaches to want to understand those details so that they can be better. And I'm not going to do that by keep telling them that's crap, that's no good, that's not good. And we've had one that's been working with us over a year. We've got one that's coming up to a year now. And I'd like to think, we had a meeting the other day or yesterday, we do it every Tuesday. And I actually told them how well they're doing. And it felt fucking amazing having an environment of coaches and thinking, this is only going to get better if I continue to grow, because it's going to be me that implodes this whole thing, not them. They will continue growing because it's a process of time in the industry. The more hours they have. So part of our KPIs is we track how many hours they've done. What I'm really curious to find out is what threshold, is it 1,000 hours? Is it 2,000? What threshold does the penny drop and someone comes like, they're really good? Because I don't know that data yet. We haven't got there, but I can see when they're getting closer to it, things are getting better. So I'm excited for that kind of thing in the business.
Do you think it's number results of sessions they've done, or do you reckon it's results? Because I often find when I mentor students, it's when they get that first result, and they could get lucky. It could be the second person in the door. It could be the 20th. When they get that first really outstanding result. For guys, it's a guy with a six-pack. For girls, it may be slightly different. But it's when you get that result, you just see the penny drop. We're like, oh. Maybe it's not they didn't have any problems with this at all. It was just a lack of belief to really assert themselves and ask the tough questions to their clients because they didn't quite believe they had the authority to do it, but now they do.
Yeah, it's definitely believing in yourself. And that's why it's no good me telling them it's wrong, because all I'm doing is squashing that belief. And it's that, and it's also like little things like, when you've got to have that tough talk with the client because you've given them all the tools, they're just not fucking doing it. But you could be that guy that's just like, yeah, it's okay, we'll sort it out, it's okay. Or you could be that guy that goes, this is not good enough, we need to do X, Y, and Z to change it. You get under their skin a little bit, and all of a sudden you either get a great response from that client or they leave, right? We've had all of those problems happen. We've had clients leave before because the coach has actually done the right thing. And I'm like, fuck, we just lost some business, fucking hell. But at the same time, I've got to praise my coach for doing the right thing. The client wasn't the right fit for us. Simple.
Yeah.
And so I just think it's those little crossroads that coaches will come down in their career that we've had so many times that will then create belief and create that, like, say it with the chest, that helps you get to where you need to get to as a coach.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, especially with the difficult conversations. I think to be able to find middle ground in communication, you need to go both ways. You need to sometimes go look back and go, I was probably a bit of a renter friend. And then sometimes go, I was a dick. To find the middle. And for a while, a lot of coaches were having this buzzword that empathy was the most important thing. I think it's because Nick Mitchell once said empathy was the most important thing. And I don't think Nick's wrong. I really don't. But I would slightly modify it.
Yes.
And I would say assertive empathy is one of the most important things a coach has. Because I can be empathetic. Empathy is, yeah, it sounds like it was a tough weekend. Don't worry about it. We'll have a better weekend next weekend. 5 weekends on the trot that happens. Yeah. You can't have a tough conversation. Yeah. It's like, okay, I understand this was busy. I know it was bad. What can we do next week to make sure? Yeah, I know it's a busy week. We haven't got our steps in, but we're 4,000 steps behind our average. What are we doing on the weekend to get this up? I'm empathetic, but we need to hit this target. There's an assertiveness in that conversation. And when you master that, difficult conversations aren't as difficult because I'm never saying, hey, why are you eating pasta, you dick? It's cool. We're 500 calories over this week. What do you think the trigger was? What brings us down next week? It's client-led.
You're right. It's like there's this little... I went through this phase. Do you remember there was this big phase at the beginning where it was like paleo, meat and nuts and supplements, and it was like a very like... they're this way or the highway, right?
50 tubs of supplements day one because your umbilical is 4 millimeters over. Yeah, I know it.
But as much as we now understand there's a whole world away from that and it's not the most sustainable, beneficial, healthy thing in the world, we got some fucking good results doing that, right? And then I went through this phase where I started to go to uni, critical mind, literature, research, social media started. Everyone was like, weigh your macros if it fits, carbs are great, all of these things, which all of those things are correct. And then I started changing the way I was coaching. I was like, this is what you need to have for your nutrition. This is the way we train. But if you don't do it, it's okay because you've got the whole week to change it because it's a weekly total that matters. And that's correct. But now what I've done to a client that doesn't have a great knowledge is given them a lot of blurred lines. And my adherence wasn't as great with clients because I was trying to be the professor rather than coach. And sometimes you just need to say to someone, just fucking do this and it will work. And they go, okay. And they do it because it's clear. And I've found myself come out of that now because I really know it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? You know, like when you get to expert stage and you realize you don't need to be like that because there's way more. And it's not that I've gone back to paleo because there's a lot wrong with that, but it's now that I've got more clarity in what I'm saying that when I tell someone to do something, it's with chest. And if you're not doing it, there's scenarios, obviously. It's like, you need to be doing this. And I feel like when we go back to the novice PT, they're not able to say it with chest yet because they haven't got that perspective or that amount of contact time with different people to understand that actually the problem is us. We're not being clear. We're giving them all the tools, but we're talking to people that haven't got the depth that we have.
So it's like MyFitnessPal. I see it a lot in coaching forums where people go, I don't give meal plans. They're really anti-meal, but I hate meal plans because it's not sustainable. Neither is tracking your fucking macros. And imagine like saying like, okay, so I want you to have 700 calories, 140 grams of protein. And people are like, what's a protein source? By the way, you can have any food in the world and they all have different numbers and different additives and different everything else. Like, oh my God, it's like needing a degree. Like, I'm like you, I did exactly the same thing. And how I've come back now is I'm more flexible on the initial plan. But once that initial plan is decided, you're doing it because you agreed to this. So I will put whatever you want in your initial meal plan. But once it's locked, signed, sealed, delivered, execute. You know? And if it doesn't, the conversation isn't, it's all right. Maybe we'll give you a few extra calories. It's, okay, this is our target. We agreed on this. What's making it difficult? Do we need to change the goal? And I'm very much a firm believer in what I hate. And one of the things every coach gets it. But one thing I'm in a mission to try and eliminate from coaches and my own is limbo. Clients, when they don't go all in on a diet and they sort of fanny about with it, and then they end up in this position where they're bored of dieting, but they're far too fat to start building. And they just end up coming in and training. I'd rather someone go, I don't want to do it. Let's set a strength goal. Own what you want. I don't care if it's not dieting, but just own it.
Exactly. I'll help facilitate you get into the direction, but once you're in, sign the fucking document and get on with it. Because, so I had a conversation with a client yesterday. She's prepping for bikini. She's doing a carnival somewhere in, I think she's going out to the West Indies or somewhere to do carnival, right? And she needs to get into phenomenal shape. So we've started and we're dialing it in because she understands that. And we had this conversation about sustainability. She was like, it's not really sustainable, is it? And I said, yeah, but what we're trying to achieve is not. Your goal is not sustainable. So we can't be sustainable trying to achieve it. Let's get there. And then we'll look at other options, because otherwise you're going to be the same person that stands in your bikini going, it wasn't quite where I got there, but hey, at least my diet's sustainable. So it's perspective. And I think when you go with something, you have to understand the reasoning behind why you're doing it. And if you're in, you're fucking in. And if you're not, see you later. That's kind of how I've got to.
Yeah, me too. And I'm so glad you said that about sustainable. I did a whole topic of a podcast. So one of my clients is also a coach called Diets Aren't Meant to Be Sustainable. And it's interesting. I came around to this way of thinking that diets are not meant to be sustainable. This is why I'm a big fan. And I know everyone won't think like me, but I'm a big fan of set a short time frame as you need to be in that deficit, go hard, get it done, rather than you end up in this sort of wishy-washy situation, because then eventually you kind of get to the point where, well, I lost the first 5 kilos going out on a Saturday night. Yeah, but you're not going to lose the last 5, and it's harder to do it on day one when you give them all the Poliquin supplements and give them the low-carb boot camp and the meat and nuts at breakfast. It's much easier to convince people when they're motivated. Week 6, when they stop losing and their motivation starts to dip, is not the time. And I started doing this podcast. I've had, about well over 100 episodes in. Most of them are coaches. Not one coach has said dieting should be sustainable. Not one.
Yeah, of course. Life isn't sustainable. We all die, right? Life's for fulfillment. So whatever you pick in your fitness journey should also fulfill you. Because you're gonna give me a big hug as a client when you get to the result you want. You're not going to tell to me about how you got there. You're just going to remember how you got there. And it also is like, I'm sure you've read Conscious Coaching by Brett Bartholomew, and it's like all about buy-in. To get buy-in, it's so crucial that you are clear on what needs to happen. The communication in which you get it across, you kind of have the same kind of things that you resonate with, and they start seeing results. Because if they don't, you're the one who they're going to point fingers at. So it's kind of like sustainable for what? Do you know what I mean? We'll talk about that on a long game, but not in a short game. I always go back to this. Say I've got athletes for 4 weeks, right? I've only got them for 4 weeks of preseason. They're baseball players and they've all got shoulder injuries. And I spend 2 weeks doing rotator cuff work with them. I'm sacked. They're not going to be ready for the season, but only got 4 weeks. I need to find a way to do like bigger exercise. Let's say a power snatch to sort the rotator cuffs out. Because I'm trying to be sustainable, but 4 weeks is not fucking sustainable. The season is.
Yes. I always think with the dieting aspect as well, when you're looking at sustainable, people go, what does sustainable mean to you? First off, sustainable you on day one is what you're currently doing. It's pizza Saturdays, it's 4 times date night, it's beers with the boys, right? Sustainable led to current physique. We're looking for what you think is sustainable at the end. So we go through a more aggressive phase. And I say aggressive, I don't mean necessarily aggressive in terms of hardcore low calories. I mean aggressive in terms of you're committed. And then at the end, you might go, well, I don't want 4 nights a week beers with the boys, but I quite like a couple of drinks on a Saturday night. Cool, let's add that back in. You find the middle ground. And when it comes to sustainable, if you were dieting right now and I said to you, you can go out and have a drink, but just stick to your limit. Now, while for some clients that may work, you're not going to truly enjoy that beer because in the back of your mind, you're going, this isn't working towards the bigger goal. Which if you got the bigger goal done, and then I went, Andy, we're going out for beers, you have a great night. It's a totally different experience. So just put 4 weeks aside, 8 weeks aside, and it's not that long.
Perception is key. Definitely.
Do you work with your coaches in terms of setting expectations? Because what we've essentially been talking about here is expectation management is massively underrated in coaching. So how do you coach your coaches to set the right expectations with their clients?
I think I always suggest this from my own experience to them. And you probably say the same things. Do you remember your first clients that you had? The first ever ones? And then you trained them for a bit and you was a little bit like the friend because they're your first clients, you want to keep them. And you learn new things, you've done your courses, you're learning new things and you're trying to implement those things into clients and they just don't fucking listen. But as that's going on, you're picking up new clients and your new clients were always getting you better results because you were setting the bar better in your consultations because you had better tools. You understood you better and what you needed to do with people. So I always say to coaches, whether they're mine or the external people, how you set the bar to begin with is how your whole coaching process is going to achieve. Because if you let it go, there's no going back. So that's how I set my expectation onto them. And then I'm like, now you need to use that same kind of philosophy to set expectations to begin with. Because if the client doesn't buy into those expectations, you know you're not getting a result with them straight away. And one of the best ways we understand is when we do the onboarding and we send them par Q, the client agreement, and like set up to the app and things like that. And there's the clients that just fucking do it straight away, and you're like, this guy's going to be sick. And then there's the first session has started, and they still haven't even opened the document, and you're like, this is going to be a long journey. And it's kind of sifting through and understanding what process you're going to use and how you're going to expect what you're going to have from them, and whether you even want to work with them. And I think it's little tools like that I try and help them understand. Because the par Q one for me is massive. Can always tell.
Yes. And also we see things like, you see it on check-ins, but also in the par Q when people put things like, what's your goal? Fat loss. Or even worse, sometimes I get, what's your goal? Yes. I'm like, you're just trying to even the box.
Even when you get the lead gen comes through your mailbox and it's like, I want abs, and abs isn't even spelt right when it's like a 3-letter word. And then you've got another one where it's like, I'm a mother of 3 and I've had this and I had this injury and I used to train with a trainer and this was and they give you like a really in-depth thing and you go, this means something to this person. It's not just Friday night, they've had a few beers and they've gone, oh shit, this is not looking great. Let me quickly Google personal trainer. You come up and then they send you a little DM.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things I always do, I always set one of the expectations I always set is I have a first 21 days email that goes out to my clients. And that is like, I want you for the first 3 weeks to send me an end of day report, weight, steps, food pictures, picture your food diary. And that sets a precedent as it is. But how I've learned to respond to that also sets a better example. And one of the things I've learned is that in that first 21 days, I'm looking for accuracy over perfection. So I had a couple of examples. I had a client once that had like 0.3 of a glass of wine. I didn't tell her off for having wine because now that I'm being that coach that says that shit, right? You create that fail mindset. But what I say is, did you just have 0.3 of a glass of wine? Who has 0.3 of a glass of wine? You had at least a glass. Okay, I had 2 glasses. Okay, next time, put 2 glasses in. I see here 1 ounce of steak. Who eats a 1 ounce steak? So I want that in because if I can get that into the head, like 1, I'm not going to tell you off. 2, I'm just looking for data. They understand that. 3, when you do have a plateau, we know what you're having. It's not slapdash. If we can encourage attention to detail now, when people ask me, so I've got clients having like 300-400 grams of carbs and still losing weight. And people are expecting this miracle answer. Is it a supplement? Is it a lifestyle? Is it a training protocol? And, there are things that may help that slightly. But what I do is I show them their food diaries and I go, this is why. Because they're not missing cookies and not putting their snacks in. They're tracking on the weekends. Like, these little things is you're doing the same, but you're just doing the same and hiding it.
Yeah. And also it's like, I always say this, people are like, should I weigh myself? Because like I don't want the scales to be like, me. Like, you get that whole thing. And I'm like, in any data, in any instrument that you use, you have to understand what the data represents. You have to collect it properly. And then you're not fearful of it anymore. So the fact you're slapdashing everything everywhere is you don't understand data anyway. So if we can get them to a stage that you're speaking about, naturally, they're doing better already because they're thinking about it. And it takes away that mindless eating and just like, and then there is a time and place with it. I love going to restaurants with my mates and just gives a fuck. I don't want to think about it. But on a whole, if you're mindless about these things, you're never really going to get there unless you're kind of super clued up on what nutrition is. But even still, like, I know a lot about nutrition, but when I don't bother to track, it gives me room to be like, I think you did a post a couple of days ago about I think it was like milk in your coffee, and you're like, it accumulates.
Yeah.
And that's how my life has been for the last 4 years. And I'm like, fuck, I'm getting married in 9 months. Yeah.
So bad. So Ices, not lattes, fucking kill me. Another one is any blue cheese dip. I put chicken in it. Bad mistake.
But it's like, we know quite a bit. So what if we're now talking about someone who doesn't know nothing and they're mindless? So if we can even get them 5% mindless or mindful when they start logging, we've got more like a 20% change. We've got a big change going on. And the other thing that I used to think about is like, well, when coaches were like, fuck calories, fuck this, fuck that. But like, they're so like tempo 4010. Wave load and all these, like, you're tracking every element of your workout when really you could have just done a push pull split, whatever, and it would have worked, but you won't track your nutrition. Like, why are you being so diligent over here? Yeah. So I just think it's like factoring it in where you can have diligence, where it's not taking up so much of your consumption of your day because there's enough other shit that you need to be doing. And if you can find a happy medium, most people would do well with tracking. They need that education. It's like going to school for 3 months, learn it, and then we can kind of loosely learn it.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I went on that interesting you mentioned about training and people being meticulous with it. I did a 5-hour mentorship with Tom Hibbert from Winning Strength when I went back. Nice. And it's great. I love spending any time with Tom. I'll pay any day to sit down with Tom and chat about training and stuff. But the biggest takeaway, because I said I want to learn everything you know about hypertrophy programming. And
let me guess. Did he say keep it simple?
Kinda. But he went a little bit more in depth than that. He basically said, like, when it comes to strength training, what he's known for, there is methods of peaking and loading and percentages and all this sort of stuff that he manipulates. When it comes to strength training, we basically know that you need to train hard enough to get a response. So whatever training modality you pick, it's got to be something the client psychologically engaged with to train hard. And that was it. So we can sit there and talk perfect periodization strategies and undulating and linear and all this sort of stuff. It was like, if the client hates it, and bear in mind, we're talking about general population clients here that are going to probably do that, sleep 3 hours a night, go out, eat kebabs and do cocaine on a Saturday night. And we're sitting there trying to work out their perfect strategy. And it's like, get them to train hard enough and then slowly work on their recovery and the food.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm training an ice hockey player at the moment, and he's gone up 3 divisions, I think it is, or 2 divisions, and I've only trained him for like maybe 9 months. And I wouldn't even say that it's ultimately about this amazing training program that I've done. I wouldn't even say that it was periodized properly. But what I did was made sure that I wrote it in a way where that when he got onto the ice, he wasn't fucked. Simple as that. Whereas before, what he was doing was training, turning up on the ice, and he saw like got DOMs. So I just stripped that out and give him a little bit of a strategy so that when he was on the ice, he could play. Then we'll get him going and confident and believing and buying into my methods. And then I can start integrating these little cogs of periodization that are going to be cool, because now he's listening to me. He believes me.
Yeah.
And I find that a lot with sports clients is that they just want to play their sport. They couldn't give a fuck about the gym. They just know it's useful for them. So it's just little tricks and things. And I think you get to know that when you work with people more. And that's why just reading the textbook isn't right. And I've been that person. You know, I've read Super Training from back to front. That book's like a fucking encyclopedia. And then you're like talking to Dot about like, I don't know, conjugate systems and things like this. And she's just like, I just want to lose my belly and have some glutes. And all I really needed to give her was like 4 sets of 10 on a fucking hip extension or something, and just teach her how to do that well and how to recover. And then we can go there later. So I just think you learn as you grow.
Yeah, I also think there's something interesting you mentioned was about the language you use, right? And obviously I know that was an over-the-top analogy of talking to Dot about conjugate training. But I see this certainly when trainers start learning anatomy. And I generally go, and I'll ask you about what you think about these, your 2 biggest skills a coach should need in a second. But I generally firmly believe that if there's 2 things you spend your time studying, it is psychology and like anatomy/mechanics. Now, I don't think either of these are the most important skill necessarily. But psychology, before you learn about fancy nutritional approaches, it means nothing if you can't get someone to stick to it. So learning psychology helps their communication to stick to anything. Learning anatomy, while you don't need to learn it like a surgeon, it allows you to go into a new gym and adapt. It allows the gyms to close and adapt. It allows to have a holiday plan and adapt. And you can layer on how to periodize those programs later, but learn how to make one good program. But when people start going down these wormholes, I was like, squeeze your lats, squeeze your glutes. And I always make the joke as like, if you said squeeze your teres major, the client wouldn't know what the fuck you were talking about.
I have a serious problem, and a lot of people argue with me about this, with how much literature that is readily available to the current, you know, it's not professional, we're mainstream. That is hypertrophy. There's too much hypertrophy literature, and people forget locomotion and skill acquisition and how we can connect the dots to actually elicit hypertrophy. So one of the big ones is like when they say, tuck your chin in and squeeze your glutes, and the EMG data is more than when you're not, right? But what happens when you do that is you send a neural drive by doing that, but you're also thinking about squeezing them harder. And we know EMG is limited, because if you squeeze harder, it's going to show. You don't even need to put weight on it. It just will have higher EMG data. So it loses concept. But the thing is, if you make someone so rigid at isolating things like that, you reduce locomotion, right? Because they don't know how to connect the dots. All they're thinking about is like squeezing their glutes really hard. So one thing that I think adds to was it 3 or 2 that you just said?
2.
Psychology. And what was the other one?
Anatomy/mechanics.
Anatomy. The third one is skill acquisition.
Yes.
I think people really are lacking in how we can deliver skill acquisition on anything, whether it's hypertrophy or locomotion or whatever.
Or dieting.
We're looking at someone like, what's that?
Or dieting. It's a skill.
Or dieting. Yeah. But what I mean by, I'm talking about training now, but you're right. But what I mean is, you see like Dot, I keep using Dot, and she's like never trained in her life. And the first exercise dummy PT gives her is walking lunge, right? And they've also got strength coach on their back. It says strength coach on the back. And you think they're like wobbling around like Bambi on ice, right? And you think, number one, you don't know Newton's second law. Every action has an equal reaction. She's not strong enough to take her body weight, which is 50 kilos, and you've just given her 12 kilos in each hand. So it doesn't make any fucking sense anyway, because 50 kilos has gone the other way and you've added more. But secondly, you haven't even taught her how to split squat, lunge, whatever it is. You haven't taught her that mechanism. So how do we break down a mechanism? You know, there's a continuum of skills and capacities. Are they strong enough, or have they not got the cognitive function? And then how do we offer things like positive reinforcement so that it cements, you know, autonomy, that they understand it without thinking about it? So part of the thing that I do with the mentorship is anatomy, I think, is taught in isolation too much. And I hate using the word functional anatomy, but it's practical anatomy. It's like when we do a lunge, this is what happens. You get hip extension, you get blah, 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 blah. These are the joint levers that change. how do I cue the client to do it correctly? Because ultimately there's a thing in locomotion, there's a thing in skill acquisition where if I break things down too much, the person doesn't actually acquire the skill properly because they're thinking about each sequence. And there's a lot of research from Fitz and Posner if you want to look at it, and you probably know about it anyway. But what they speak about is there's 3 different phases of skill acquisition. And it's like going through like unconscious to semi-conscious to like having it as an autonomous kind of thing where you just know it with your eyes shut. And you see it all the time with golfers. I'll go away from Dot. Let's go to Ted the golfer, and he's on the cable machine and he's just slamming the thing across because he's seen some YouTube video. And then he goes on the golf course and his fucking golf swing is shit because he's broken down all the elements of the swing too much and he's made it rigid and he's thinking about it, whereby I think there was I've forgotten the name of it. There's a book and there's a famous tennis coach and he cued it as, like a forearm. He cued it as just shut the door. Just shut the door. And they were just beautiful. They were just like, shut the door. Instead of going, what you need to do is plant your front foot, bring your shoulder around so your torso changes in a quarter position, then strike through. And then you've got the athlete going. And it's just so disconnected that they haven't got a good forearm swing. And I feel like coaches don't have any of that because all they have is squeeze or eccentric or put your shoulder in this position or squeeze hard. And then they can't squeeze because they don't know where it is. Where actually, if you just teach them to move properly with the type of cue, a lot of things fix themselves on their own. Yeah, like there's a thing to say, like if I give someone a weight and go, do it, not a stupid way, they will find a way to do it. They will compensate in a way. And then you as a coach have a lot of tools in front of you. You can see where it's not working. So then you know what to do next. I feel like a lot of coaches speak too much. So, right, what you need to do, because in your level 3, they're like, these are the 10 cues you need to give when you do a squat. So it's like chest up, legs out, and you keep talking. They're not ready for that yet. Just give them the weight and tell them to squat. Let's see it. It's not a weight that's going to kill them. Then you know where to go with it.
Yeah.
And then you can build skill.
I
think that's how people learn anatomy.
Yeah, we are so much on the same page here. It's crazy, and I'm so glad you even used the walking lunge because we're more and more coaches now are starting to understand that everyone should think of squat, bench, and deadlift were the basics. The basics. You got to be able to control your ankle, your knee, your hip, your spine. You've got to have good range of motion to the shoulder. You've got to be able to brace effectively. Not basic, but somehow the walking lunge, which I think is the equivalent of the squat in terms of unilateral squat pattern, is somehow slipped through the cracks as this thing that people put in their C series, and it's the most complex lift of the day.
Yeah, I find it's placed for 2 reasons. One, because the coach goes, "He's going to fuck them up, man. It's going to be hard." And number 2, when the coach is hiding because it's a busy gym, and they're like, "There's no kit. What can I do? We'll just do the walking lunge on the track because no one's on there." They kind of get used in that. So yeah, I don't know why it's like that, but I feel like yeah, there's a lot wrong with a walking lunge a lot of the time.
I can mess them up with a leg press. I can mess up with a wall sit. And I think there's an element of things here is like, as you said, it's knowing how far to. I think if you understand, and this is why I think when I come into anatomy, I don't mean you need to know exact origins and insertions. No, you need to know how to line something up with a muscle so you can get set up right. I've had to cue far less. Now I understand setup and understand what a muscle does. So how many coaches think go into a row that we're aiming for the lats, think pull your shoulder blades back. Cool.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. Our friend Steve bangs on about this all the time, and actually, I remember when we first started at Virgin, he was just naturally really good at this because I think it's just his mindset. He's curious about it needs to look good. Steve's all about looking good all the time. He has to look good. Start positions. Just spend more time teaching your client to start right, and then there's a cascade of events that happen after that usually are okay. If you don't even set them up correct, how the fuck are you expecting them to do it right? So rather than understanding the anatomy in isolation, why don't we just learn the anatomy of the start positions of most of the basic stuff? 100%. Then you're already winning. You're winning straight away. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how I go with it.
I think I also what I really resonated with is like getting people to just do it. In my initial assessments to people, I think people especially in assessments, people talk. This is how you squat. This is how you deadlift. I'm like, you've lost out on so much information here. What I tend to do when I go into assessment, I used to squat, for example. Have you ever squat before? If they say no, I will show them because I don't want them to feel like an idiot and lose buy-in on the first day. But if they say yes, which 90% of people do, I went, fantastic. Show me your squat. And this does two things. One, it shows me what their squat actually looks like. And then if I go and then try and change something, let's say I elevate the heels, let's say I just coach them a bit. Let's say I just do something, put their arms out, have a counterbalance. I just do something to change that squat. If it immediately improves, I go, okay, this client's coachable. So they might not be ready to squat now, but they'll be ready to squat very quickly. I can progress them fast because they get this. If they have no awareness and I give them a few things and it's still all over the place, cool, you're getting on a leg press. That's fine.
Yeah.
Find how far do you have to regress before it's easier to do what you want them to do rather than having to try and spend 30, 40 minutes of a client session forcing a hip hinge into someone who has no idea what they're doing.
It's clues, patterns, choices, isn't it? They're in front of you all the time. What clues can you see? Is there a constant trend, the pattern? And what choice do I have to change this? And I think I always use that as a framework that I try to give to the coaches. Because if they're thinking like that all the time, there's more watching and looking and hearing than there is all the time to the other person in front of them. When that person, all they can hear is noise. They can't hear what you're saying yet because they're not at that level. You know, talking to them about their solus major. It's like, fuck's sake. I'm not telling you find it yet.
Yeah, exactly. Good luck finding it. How deep is that muscle? But I think with those things it's so important. Also start, as you mentioned as well, like understanding why people are doing things wrong. I've coined a term with my coaches that I mentor called the anti-touch cue. We always talk, touch the muscle. Don't touch the muscle you don't want to work. Touch the muscle you want to work. I think there's a time and a place for deliberately touching something you don't want to work. And my example will be things like putting your hand on someone's calves on a leg curl and putting your hand around someone's forearms on a pull down. Why does someone cheat? Because they're trying to find a more efficient way of doing something. So if I'm holding their wrist here on a pull down, and if they start to try and pull with the hand first, not initiate, I could stop it. If it's harder to cheat than do it right, you have no option but to do it right until that becomes an ingrained skill. Same thing with the leg. If you push your thighs down rather than kick up, you won't lift the butt so much. If it still does, it's too heavy. But I see so many people, I see things like holding shoulders down on a lat pull down, or like literally put the whole body weight. They're trying to give some of their clients CPR, pushing down on the leg curl. And I'm like, you're missing the point.
On the thing of touching, I think it's really important. Like we had a coach say to us, cat cow. He just can't do cat cow. I've given him all the fucking cues. How do I get him to do cat cow? I was like, just put him in that position. Just do it. Just fucking put your hands in his chest and one on his back, put him in there. Sooner or later, he'll connect the dots and you won't have to put your hands there anymore. Bang. And it's all about association for clients. They need to understand feel. And if they can't feel it yet, your cue is not good enough. And that's why I love external cues, but also your hands, you get them dirty. And that's why I think it's a different scenario when someone like ourselves are looking to go online. But I feel like when you're new, get your hands dirty or you're missing out on a lot. And for me, I got into this first and foremost because I was curious about being a really good coach, not because I wanted to make money. Money happened because of that. People are getting into this now because they're like, oh, I can fucking scale this. Like, I've seen this business coach told me I can do X, Y, and Z. It's like, great. We all need to make good money. And it's great if you can. And if you do it, I'll clap you anyway. But I'm not even looking at that. All I cared about was being a good coach. That's where the passion was to begin with.
Do you think coaches now are more, there's many reasons for this. We can look at social media. We think this is the problem. But are coaches more short-term mindset? So I'll use the example of me, right, compared to a brand new coach now. They come online because they can scale it. They can make short-term money. They can do a few years of 5, 10 grand months. But you can only sell shit once. And then eventually things start to peter off. Now, I probably, or almost certainly, made considerably less money for the first 10 years of my career than I could have done. But what I would like to think is those 10 years may set me up to make more in 5 years' time because of that. Are we too short-term focused now as an industry?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. The reason why you're doing where you're doing now is because of the things that you've done in the previous life. It helps you. I also think that it's just the mindset of people, fear of missing out. What is the norm? Consensus. Remember the powers of persuasion, right? We've got reciprocity. You have to give to receive. If I invite you round for dinner, in 2 weeks, you say, come round, we'll cook you dinner. Yeah. The second one is consensus. What is everyone else doing? Then that must be right. And PTs, because they're funneled into either social media or a gym, it's like, you see this all the time. If you're the elite PT and you're giving workouts, then sooner or later, everyone else is doing the same workouts and the same warm-up routine. Everyone's doing thread the needles and cat cows because it's a consensus thing. So I feel like what we're getting now from people is, well, everyone's doing it, so it must be right. And that's not the right way to start a business. That's not the right way to fulfill yourself, because it's just not the right thing to be doing. You need to understand what you want, where you want to go, and does it fucking fulfill you? Because if it does, you're going to fly, because you're going to go through those doors when times are shit, because they will be shit a lot of the time. And then you've got like authority. That's another power of persuasion. Are you getting results? Are people speaking about you? Where are you positioning yourself to persuade people to work with you? You've got likability. You can't just be a nerd all the time unless you're with other nerds. So you have to speak the language of the people in front of you. You got scarcity, limited time offer, otherwise my doors are shut. Or this is how much it costs, only for a week. Things like that. There's so many ways in which you can persuade someone to do the things that you need to do. You just need to understand what those powers of persuasions are. But going back to why do you think trainers are doing that? I think it's consensus. That's what's persuading them. Because everyone's fucking doing it. And that's not necessarily right.
We spoke a lot about in this episode about weaknesses, struggles, things that people can improve on when it's on the gym floor, off the gym floor. Over the last few years, I spent so much time focusing on improving my weaknesses. And you mentioned, obviously, with fulfillment, you mentioned making sure you don't create culture for your staff where people feel like they're failing. I'm generally a big believer these days, to a degree, in the phrase, systemize your weaknesses so you can devote more time to your unique strengths. Yeah, is that something you believe in, or do you think people need to plug their gaps, other than strength training, where it's about plugging the gaps? But
you need people to grow. You will not grow a business without people. There's only so much shit you can do yourself, right? The biggest mistake I see people make, though, is they hire people without having systems, operations, and processes. You see it all the time at the local gym. They've hired some reception staff, and someone comes in the door and they're like, hi, what are you doing? Blah, 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 whatever. These are our memberships, and they sign them up. The next person comes in, they don't deliver that same mechanism to that person. It's a completely different user experience. They're like, oh, you just go online, we've got the prices on there. The problem is, you need to hire people, but if you haven't created your systems, operations, and processes, your user experience is going to be like this. And if it's like this, you're not going to last very long, because that's the user's perception. One of the powers of persuasion is consensus. If there's mixed reviews about you, there's no certainty. People will give you cash when they have a return on investment, and that needs to be a certainty. People come to you because you're fucking so good at getting transformations. They're fucking hundreds of them. There's so many. That's what I know you for. So if I want to get jacked, I'm paying you. Things like that. So you're absolutely right. You do need to scale it. You can't do everything. But I still think people miss the point that you can't just leverage work out. You have to build. Otherwise, you depend. And if you depend, as soon as that person leaves, you're fucked, especially if they're doing a good job for you. It should be able to replace that person.
I want to come back to that point, but there's one thing you mentioned here that was very nicely, by the way, saying that you know me for results and having lots of them. And I think I want to come back to that before I forget about it. And it's potentially imposter syndrome in coaches. Now, I have two minds about imposter syndrome in the sense of I am actually quite grateful for it. I had a client on my last day before I moved to Hong Kong, or a client was a coach on last day. When did you get over the imposter syndrome? And I went, I don't think I have. And I don't think it's a bad thing, because it's my imposter syndrome that keeps me growing. It's imposter syndrome that keeps me pushing out my comfort zone because I want to learn more. If I thought I had made it, I wouldn't achieve anything. But on the flip side, I noticed something the other day, and it was tied into what you just said there. It was very nice about me, is that when I see a result on social media, I will go, man, what did that coach do to get such a great result? If I achieve an equivalent result myself, I put all the credit on the client. This client killed it. They did really well. So do you think it's something that coaches generally, because I know it's cliche that coaches want to get into this industry, want to help people, but I generally think in my experience, maybe less so now with the business mentor push, but I think most do. And do you think there is a problem with those kind of people maybe not pushing to this and scaling their businesses the way they should do, because they maybe don't take credit for their own work, but are constantly comparing themselves to other people for doing exactly the same stuff?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. It's your work, you should promote it. But I always, when I put it, I'm like, well done, Ben, or well done, James, or it's always like, put it onto the client, because it is the client at the end of the day. I'm just giving them the tools. They've run through the wall for it. But I always go back to this. Steve always used to say this. It's like the best strength and conditioning coaches in the world, you don't even know who they are. You know who their athletes are there. And so if your business continuously has some sort of result, whether it's transformations, people jumping higher, whatever it is, and you're known for that, people are going to come to you because it's a consensus thing. It doesn't matter whether you delivered it, your coach delivered it. They're going to know it was coming from Made. They're going to know it's coming from MTM or wherever it is. They will know that because you're constantly on your channels plugging this identity. There's a great book called Built to Sell. I don't know if you've read that before, but it's all about productizing your service. A lot of people got services, but if you want to become referable, repeatable and referable, that is, you need to productize your service so it's recognizable. And that is what you said earlier about on the jack of all trades. I know so many things. That's also been a hindrance to us. Like, I'm helping people doing business. I'm helping people do S&C work for their hockey, for their BJJ. I'm doing transformations. That's almost diluted me a little bit if I wanted to be elite. So how do I take each element of that and then go, right, this is what I'm going to formalize as a framework to cater for a particular person who speaks in a particular way, who has a particular problem, and I will bridge the gap and create the value for them to serve. And if you do that, you will scale quickly because it's a repeatable thing that people are seeing and going, hey, you see Darren. Darren's one of my good friends. He's one of my best friends. And Neat Up 24/7 was a game that he just, Neat Up 24/7, If you say something that often, people will they will cotton on and they will say it. And it's just like dominoes. It will get bigger and bigger. One of my friends, he's a mutual friend. I don't know him that well, but I know of him. He'd done the thing in the summer called Belly Must Go. He's not a PT, he's just a footballer. And he was like, I need to get rid of this belly and get fit. And he kept saying, belly must go, belly must go, belly must go. By the end of the summer, everyone was putting up stories of belly must go with things they were eating, with training that they were doing. He's not even a PT. I was thinking, I could have done that. So I just think it's consistency, consensus, and actually productizing what you're doing so that it's like repeatable, people cotton onto it. Then you have something that's going to be referable, because that's your biggest means. We think about all this stuff with like lead generation tools. Your biggest means is people, bringing more people to your business. It's the safest way. It's the biggest way. And you've had consultations with people in the past who have come through your social media or your website, right? But equally, you've had consultations where someone has referred you. It's half the challenge. They've already bought it. So it's a really important thing if you want to scale your business to productize, I think. But one thing I also see really wrong with people is when they productize so many things that they actually liquidate their flagship because they dilute it. So you got your flagship and then you've got like all these different layer cakes of a similar kind of thing. Or like it could be, my flagship is transformations, and then they've got like S&C version or bodybuilding version, all these different things. And now you just downsold your big flagship because you've diluted its value because there's too much going on. And I see that a lot with this whole like free challenges and this and all this ladder coaching.
Group coaching is the one at the moment, because they'll see someone like Darren, James Smith, do these group models to make loads of money. And I'm like, yeah, but look at their audience, look at their following. If you have that following, great. If you have 3,000 people on Instagram, maybe go high ticket. Maybe make it to a point where you can give a really, really good service because you don't have that volume. And you will get on a sales call and go, here's my group offer, here's my top offer. That person may have bought the top offer, but they went, well, I can't see the difference. I'm just going to go with the 50 quid a month offer.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, at the end of the day, none of the things are wrong. You can go down the route that they've done. They've done very well. You can go down the high ticket. You can go in the middle. You can do all of that. But it always comes down to is, what do you want? What do you want to achieve? For me, the group stuff, although I look at what my bank account could look like doing that, I don't think it would fulfill my lifestyle. One, I like the human, like one-to-one, whether it's online or not. I just like that, like I'm helping someone diligently. I like doing group coaching, but to the masses of that scale, I'm not quite sure. And secondly, I don't think I've got that personality where I could be constantly emailing and storyboarding, and it's just not something that I want to be doing. So I've gone, that's not my model. And I think that's the lesson I want to get across is I'm so proud of what Dee does. We've had so many mentorship calls together and he's doing a fantastic job of what he's doing, but I know it wouldn't work for me. So I'm not going to spend my energy trying to copy that. And I know in business, people talk about if something works, why are you trying to change it? Do that. But the fundamental thing comes down to is, does it fulfill you? Because if it doesn't, when the days are dark, because there's going to be some big dark days in business, you won't be doing what you need to be doing. You just sack it off.
So if someone is in this position now where they're overworked, underpaid, they maybe have their flagship, they kind of know where they want, but they don't know how to scale. We're talking about creating a system so it's replicable. Where would you direct someone to go first? What are the first 2 to 3 things that you think would be good to outsource or systemize?
As in, like, I think the first thing is they need the product. So many people will go, right, yeah, so what I want to do is create an online service and it's going to help transform people. I want to be that guy that transforms people. And I'm like, right, write the program. They don't know where to start. They don't know how to create a program. They don't know how to periodize it. They don't know how to deliver it. They're like, should I use Google Sheets? Should I get an app? I'm like, listen, you can use Google Sheets. I've used them for many years, but this market is saturated. And at the end of the day, you need to be the best one. So your deliverables need to be elite. Yeah, because you're trying to bring an elite service. So you need to do your homework and find a vehicle to deliver your service. It might be Google Sheets. But hey, if someone down the road who's half as good as you is delivering a nice user experience where they're not going to go, hey, what's that squat? I don't know what it is. They can just log on and it's got the fucking video on there and all their metrics from before. They're probably going to go with that person because it's more friendly. So I think you need your product first and how you're going to deliver it. If you haven't got that, just because someone down the road's doing, you've seen that it's got scale and you want to do it and you now want to become a coach, learn how to do that first. If you're online, you need to be able to write programs. If you're not online, you can probably get away with it a little bit so long as you can coach. So coaching and program design, I think, is really important to start with in our field. I don't care about business. I'm not a business coach. You need to be able to do that first. Once you do that, we can look at who's the demographic, what's their problem, where do they hang out, can they afford you, all of those kind of things. And you can start talking about the messaging that you're going to get across on a consistent basis so that you can persuade them. It's one of the powers of persuasions. What things are you going to put on your socials? What things are you going to put on your blogs, on your websites? What mediums are you going to use to try and leverage people over? And then the last thing that I would tell them to do is test it. No one tests anything. One of the things I did at the beginning when I had 0 clients in Guildford was I was like, right, fortunately enough, someone inquired and I had one. I had one at the beginning. And I was like, oh, they bought 2 sessions a week from me. I think I remember. And I was like, right, you're going to do 4 sessions with me. Pay the 2, but I'm going to give you 4. Because I know if I'm doing 4 sessions with you, I'm going to get a sick result. But secondly, if I get a sick result, your husband's coming with you. And I'll get referrals off it. So what I was doing at the beginning was filling my time up. Filling my time up because I'd rather be delivering my service to real people than sitting on Facebook or Instagram trying to get people to know who I am. Because I'll do that anyway. So I had a battery of people. It was bringing confidence. And I always think on the gym floor, you're on a platform. Everyone's watching you. Everyone's watching you. So people will just inquire by looking at you. You're on a podium. So that's what I would do for a physical kind of thing. For an online kind of thing, I'd go, right, this is here. This is the thing that I'm doing. I'm looking for 10 individuals, let's say, that I can know that their friends, family, better test it, use it. It's reciprocity, right? If I give you something, I'm likely to get something back. The next block, they might pay for it if it's that good. And now I've started, and you can use people. It's dominoes, isn't it? It's mass brings mass. So if I can get real people using my things, I can start. The other thing is, I feel like in any business, when you create a startup, you usually have a fund. There's usually an amount of money that you're going to use that you've saved or you've loaned to forecast where you're going to go, right? And you will use that to go. Most PTs don't last 6 months because they liquidate a startup that's not there. They're like, 6 months, I haven't got any money to start with. So I'm like, if you're going to start your PT career, before you get to it, can you save any cash? Because you will use that to either help yourself market a little bit, get a mentor, because you and me both speak from that hymn sheet. They've been one of the biggest propellers forward, is using people that know more than you to help you and give you confidence and give you a different perspective on the way you're thinking and belief. Or it just helps you get by in life because you're not going to be getting no fucking money whilst it's happening. So make sure you have a buffer, I think. You need a cushion. You always need a cushion to springboard yourself forward. And most people do it from zero. And it can be done from zero, but fuck me, it's going to be hard, particularly in our field.
I totally agree with that. And that was something because I literally had a therapy session today talking about my relationship with money and how I've never been particularly good with it and not come from it. And like, that's the thing I've learned the hard way. Like a lot of my mentorships, investments in my business have been much slower than they needed to be because they were done in sections, because I didn't do that. I didn't create a nest egg to go, right, let's do this and let's do this relatively properly. I've learned as I've gone and I've refined, which is always going to be the case. But I could have been, in hindsight, I could have done way better if I just
a
bit longer.
And that's why I'm saying it, because it's in hindsight. And I can see, how quickly the scale would have been if I had done that in hindsight. It definitely would help.
So, like, if there was, like, just sort of close off, because I know you're going to shoot off your next meeting, your next mentoring session, so you can put all this into practice with somebody. If someone's now, like, wants to go and take one thing away, a coach wants to take one thing away from this to help their business. Let's say one thing for a gym floor coach listening and one thing for online. What would be the thing they should see when they finish this podcast? They go and implement.
The first thing applies to both is love. At the end of the day, you need to love it. You need to love yourself in your industry because that is going to radiate you forward. The other thing is you need to love your clients. So many times it's just a cash exchange. I've got my client, let's go. Some of my clients that I have now are my original clients 10 years ago. And I think it's built on love. Some of them are coming to the wedding. And when people understand that that is what you're doing, you're breaking through walls for people, you usually get a response. But secondly, when it's built from a good foundation, you will be successful. When it's not, you won't. So I think love is a really important one. You need to love what you do. The second one is I think you need to have clarity on what you want to fulfill yourself, because you can't serve someone else from an empty vessel. So if you're just creating something because you think it's the right thing to do, but it's not really what you want, it's not going to last long. It's in tangent with love. That's what I think. I think if you've got those foundations, you will always grow because you will learn.
I agree with that so much. And you mentioned retention, which you barely touched on, but I do think those two things go hand in hand, of love for your clients, love what you do, because obviously the love for your clients is self-explanatory. If you give them a better quality of service and you look after them, they will stay with you. But one of I had the best retention in my last place of work for years in the global business. And everyone's talking about like organization and goal setting and all sorts of stuff. And I was like, I'm not the biggest organizational wizard. And I was like, why on earth am I better than these people that are teaching me how to retain clients? And I think it was because I loved my craft. And I went on courses and I upscaled and I talked about this to my clients. And I had a client once, I asked him, why did you stay with me? Why have you stayed with me for 4 years? And he goes, because my investment in you is I'm not just investing in my sessions now, I'm investing in the you in 3 years. And I thought that was such a powerful thing. I was like, okay, this, when people say your education is your investment, it's not a cost. Nothing said it like that, because that's a direct reflection just on doing my education.
One thing I said to the guys is, as I get older, I'm getting closer to my demographic. So my speak and communication changes because I'm becoming a little bit more like them and it gets easier. So for young coaches out there, you just got to keep working and you got to keep communicating. You keep trying to connect. And then from our perspective, you mentioned at the beginning, like we're old and in the blah, blah, blah. Like we've been in the industry a long time. I think if you can't connect with the new generation, then you're just a myth. So I don't want to ever be seen as the old guy in the industry. There needs to be that connection because you're just a myth otherwise.
Yeah, I also think with that, there's an element as well. We talked about having your why, having that energy, and having that love for what you do. And what I've certainly battled with over the last few years, what I think has been really important, is like understanding it's okay to come back to that and realizing that it may change and it may pivot. And like at the moment, my love is with mentoring and education on the podcast maybe more than it is the one-to-one side. Apologies for any one-to-one clients listening. I do love you. I really do. But and for a while I thought that because one-to-one coaching was all I knew. And it was part of my identity. I was like, well, if I don't love this anymore in the same way, what am I doing with my life? And I realized, no, I just need to re-establish my why and go, right, where do I need to begin pivoting to go into the next phase of my career? And I don't think if I hadn't have hit that wall with this, I don't think I would have actually done that. And I would have probably just sat there and gone, I do this because it's what I've always done. And I would have seen standard just drop.
Yeah. It's just you pushing on. That's all. Fulfillment. Nice.
So for people that want to know more about More Than Muscle, you, mentoring, tell us where to find you.
On socials, it's PT Andy Pilidis. Or for the company, it's More Than Muscle Ltd. And our website is www.morethanmuscle.co.uk. You'll find us there.
Awesome, man. Matt, I've genuinely enjoyed this. It's one of the most fun I've had recording a podcast in a very, very long time. And as I said before I came in the air, you know, I'm shifting more into the coach mentoring side. So anytime you want to collaborate on anything, your end, my end, doors always open. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
Likewise, mate. You look nice chatting to you again for such a long time, mate.
Yeah, mate. Too long. Let's make it quite so long next time. Thank you very much for watching the podcast. If you're like me and like to binge watch podcast episodes, click here for our most recent episode. And if you enjoy the show and want to be updated when new videos come live, click here to subscribe to the channel.